So ever since Russia's President Vladimir Putin started his special military operation,
мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
Or as is known in the rest of the world, the war in Ukraine, he has been struggling to serve his daily dish of propaganda and brutal beatings of peaceful protesters. This has led to him shutting down almost every major social media platform and signing into law a new legislation that will make it impossible to even mention the basic facts about the war in Ukraine. Just saying the word war instead of special military operation could land you in jail for up to 15 years, and any mentions of bombings or civilians being killed by Russia can also land you in jail for a very long time. Now, Russia has never been known as a wonderful place for intense but fair debate on public issues. However, these new laws and the ruthless enforcement of them really takes the shut up and do as you're told attitude to a whole new level. It has made the current life in Russia pretty much unbearable for modern Russians that want to live in a country where they are not beaten and locked up for just voicing their opinions and simply want to build a more prosperous Russia. When you combine these new laws with the fact that almost all Russians that were working for foreign companies can't even get paid right now, you start to see why so many Russians are fleeing their home country.
The situation can become more serious anytime, so I'm really scared.
Hundreds of thousands of Russians have fled to various countries in Asia and the Middle East that have visa-free entry for them. However, a significant number of them have also fled to Finland and Georgia. And for Georgia especially, this comes with some serious consequences. Because what has happened in Ukraine is an exact replica of what happened in Georgia in 2008, when Russia invaded Georgia under the premise that it needed to protect the people in South Ossetia and Abkhazia, which is the exact same excuse that the Russians used to invade Ukraine, claiming to be liberating Donetsk and Luhansk from the so-called Nazi occupiers.
Будущего вопроса по нейтральному статусу Украины, по демилитаризации и денацификации.
So at this point, it's very clear that Vladimir Putin is not only dreaming of reuniting the Soviet Union, but he's actually already doing so, and he's using the same tactic every single time. First, he starts by stirring up unrest in the former Soviet country that houses a large Russian population. And then proceeds with arming and financing the newly formed militia groups. These militia groups will then lay claim to a territory in those regions, claiming that it's an independent state, after which Russia comes in, pretending to be this glorious savior that is liberating Russians from Nazi rule. It's really just high-stakes geopolitical theater. However, this terrible performance does not get an abysmal review in the New York Times. It actually gets bombed like crazy, and tanks rolling down people's front yards. What has happened to Georgia in 2008 and the years that followed was absolutely horrible, because not only did the country lose well over 25% of its territory, but hundreds of people have been kidnapped, tortured, and fined for no reason.
Just yesterday, 2 shepherds were actually captured by troops from the other side.
This was the original administrative boundary, as Georgia calls it, since they do not recognize Russia's claim over the land, and here you can see how the border is being shoved forward on an almost weekly basis. This border goes straight through people's yards, thereby separating families as well as separating farmers from their own land. So when their cattle grazes too close to the border, the farmers get kidnapped and their families must pay a considerable ransom to have them returned. This shows that Russia has no problems with taking over Georgia, and the only reason why they invaded Ukraine instead of Georgia is simply because Ukraine is of greater strategic importance. It's safe to say that Russia pretty much already considers Georgia a part of Russia, since they are claiming more and more of the country every week without any significant resistance. Now you might ask, why is Georgia letting this happen, and why is the country not fighting back?
Why have Georgian forces taken no action against the recent territorial claims that the Russian and South Ossetian forces have been making near major infrastructure of Georgia, including the pipeline and the highway?
Georgia is taking every action the responsible state, responsible for the security of its own country, and responsible for not allowing war on its territory, will be making. These are diplomatic actions that we are taking, and this is activation of the world community for the cause of Georgia. And we are not going to allow Russia to provoke us into another war.
Well, that's easier said than done. Because if you weigh 100 pounds and a 200-pound guy starts pushing and slapping you around, you kind of hope that's all he does, and you might try to just walk away. If you start pushing back, you're probably going to catch a real fist and he's going to break your jaw.
We all know that this is a danger, and Georgia will never be able on its own to win a war against Russia. We don't want a war. But what we should do is, this issue should be high on the international agenda, and this is completely not now. And secondly, on the ground, there should be much more reserved but resistance by law enforcement towards kidnappings, towards movement of occupation lines.
Because when Russia invaded in 2008, the battle only lasted for 5 days, after which Russia took control over the two regions and set up a full military infrastructure on Georgian soil.
А это российская база?
Российская база!
Ага. In South Ossetia alone, Russia's built 19 border bases like this.
Georgia simply wasn't able to repel a full-fledged Russian assault, and it still isn't ready to do so today. This brings us to the massive problem of thousands of Russians fleeing to Georgia. Because the whole premise of going into Ukraine was to liberate the Russians living there, so as more and more Russians flock to Georgia, it's very easy for Putin to do the same thing over there, and knowing that he will face far less opposition from the Georgian military, it's a quick victory which he can then use as a major propaganda piece. This puts Georgia at even more risk than it already is, and it could encourage Russia to simply take over the entire country instead of just the 30 or 40% that they're going after right now. In addition to this, there was an extra reason for going into Ukraine, one that President Putin likes to slap onto his rage sessions, which is that it was all done to stop NATO from expanding. This puts Georgia at a huge risk, since not only is Georgia trying to become part of the EU to enhance its economic prosperity, but Georgia is also bordering Turkey, who's already a NATO member. So if you use Putin's logic here, Georgia is basically flirting with EU membership, which would clear the way for NATO membership. So let's escalate the fighting in the independent regions and then go in as the savior of Georgia and the people will love me. Before we continue, please like and subscribe to support the channel. The Russian army actually believed they were going to be welcomed as saviors when they went into Ukraine due to all the domestic propaganda. Well, that did not go as planned.
Все. Нахуй тоже.
So clearly, more Russians into Georgia is not only a very dangerous situation going forward, but it's also a very painful reminder of the Russian encroachment of the past 14 years. And when you put all of this together, you start to see why the sentiment in Georgia is now becoming more and more unfriendly towards Russians. Because not only are the fleeing Russians having an impact on the Georgian economy, causing the housing market to explode and rents to double or even triple, they are also acting as a sort of homing beacon for Putin to send his army to. If Ukraine would have been a cakewalk, it would have been almost certain that Georgia would follow next. However, due to the sheer damage that the Ukrainian military has done to the Russians, it is making it currently very difficult to send troops to other regions. In fact, the Russian military is currently relying on militias from Africa and Eastern Europe to fight against Ukraine, since they are suffering such heavy losses. So for the time being, it seems like President Putin has his hands full with Ukraine, and starting another conflict seems to be out of the question. However, Putin has showed very clearly in the last months that reasoning is not one of his strengths. Like most Georgians, modern-day Russians just want to see their country prosper and provide new opportunities for young people to travel and work on exciting projects. Sadly, with this man in power, that future seems to be light years away. This was Fleeing Russians Are a Danger to Georgia. Please like and subscribe for more videos.